Hello everybody, it's Dan and Ross here, and today we're going to talk about corn and biotechnology. So I'm going to start off with a quote. The biotechnology issue has the potential to influence world trade flows, and consumer preferences may create two potential markets in the future. So what this is talking about is it's talking about the world trade for maize and soybeans. The United States supplies about two-thirds of the world's global maize trade. So what the concern is here is that biotechnology is not always going to be healthy, or it's going to be some cause of concern for some of the consumers. So a lot of the consumers are now pushing to continue eating their old, uh, I guess you could say, outdated ways or outdated crops. So anyway, let's continue on. So let's talk about Bacillus thuringiensis, and it's an insect, or it's a insect resistance. It's a pesticide, and it's a bacterium that's commonly found in the soil. So besides corn, this has been applied to potatoes and cotton. But this study that I was reading about, it focuses on starlink corn. And it has a modified gene that, as I quote, that encodes the Bt protein CR9C, end quote. This protein is a natural insecticide, and or pesticide, whichever you want to say, within the plant. And this was introduced into the United States in the consumer market, and it caused a lot of concern for the regulatory agencies, because there was a lot of studies linking this starlink corn to the allergenicity of people. So the FDA, they said you can do this, but it's only in other animals. It can't be with humans. Well, of course, the corn was found in human food supplies, so the government had to study the framework that caused this to happen. Well, all this studying that the government did, this ended up being a good thing, because they learned a lot about um, their the understanding of food allergies. They learned a lot about that within this study, and there was a lot of improvement on the monitorization of imported foods. This outline states that we need to develop a stronger fundamental basis for predicting allergic sensitization and reactions if novel proteins are introduced in this fashion. So now let's move on again. Aspergillus flavus. This contamination can destroy entire crops. It is a type of fungus that will cause rot, and it spreads through a lot of movement. So during harvest or transport, there's a lot of movement of the crop, and it spreads really easily. So scientists are trying to add different resistance traits to some plants and see if the trait will work, and if it does cause some sort of resistance, they're going to try to introduce it into the crop and hope that it will pyramid up. Say, if you got one plant, and then this plant breeds with this plant, and then you've got two plants, and then you take those two plants, and then you've got 6 plants, and then you've got 10 plants, and it just pyramids out. So they're hoping that that will eventually cover, over a few generations, it will cover the entire species or the entire crop. And then proteomics, the large-scale study of proteins, has shown the associated proteins that are associated with this resistance. For alternative methods, they're looking at creating antifungal compounds, as well as compounds that will block the biosynthesis of the toxins. So that means that the toxins themselves would not be able to produce their own energy. And then there are also chemicals that are applied to crops, are considered as non-degrading, and thus will not degrade through processing. This is a whole different subject. So we were talking about now going from the crop to the consumer to their mouth, what will make it there. So the chemicals that are applied to crops, most of them have been shown that they won't degrade through the processing, or sometimes even the cooking. So the chemicals that are applied in the field end up being in your mouth and in your digestive tract. So I mean, a lot of the chemicals have been studied. They know what's safe and what's not to use in human consumption crops or food grade crops. So I'm going to end this off right here with a quote, and I'll explain it too. Food crops such as corn and soy are not consumed raw but are extensively processed into various food fractions. During processing, proteins in corn and soy are subjected to harsh environmental conditions that drastically change the physical forces leading to the denaturization and loss of protein function. These conditions include thermal processing, changes in pH, reduction agents, mechanical shearing, etc. Studies have shown that processing of introduced proteins, such as enzymes that impart herbicide tolerance or proteins that control insect pests, lead to a complete loss of functional activity. Thus, dietary exposure to functionally active proteins in processed food products can be negligible and below levels of any safety concerns. So what that is saying is that through biotechnology, if we take and we start introducing proteins into the foods that we are going to be eating, a lot of these proteins can be functional, like the resistance proteins and the pesticide proteins. A lot of those, they can be good for you or good for the crops and can help to get the crop a higher yield or help it reproduce. So anyways, if we introduce these proteins into the genetics and into the genes so that the crops have these proteins, they have studied and shown that what is produced in the field does not end up in your digestive tract, that through all the process of the processing the food, transporting the food, freezing the food, cooking the food, cutting the food. They're talking about changing the pH, so that goes through cooking and simmering it down with other things. Thermal processing, that would be heating and cooling, so that'd be cooking or even freezing. And then mechanical shearing, that'd be cutting everything up. It says that it completely denatures these proteins. So even if these proteins were to be harmful to humans, by the time it ends up in your mouth, it will not be, it will be denatured. It means that it will have no effect on you. So if any of y'all took the time to listen to this, I hope y'all have a good day, and we'll see you later.